The ABA Commission on Women in the Law came out with a report today, and it's fantastic. I'm so glad they're quantifying the cost, basically the burden of being a childcare provider, and how that overwhelmingly and disproportionately impacts women. So it's basically a report about moms in the law, right? LawMas. Okay. I love the report. I read it. It's fantastic. But here's something it doesn't talk about. And as I was reading it, it was screaming in my head. And then I talked about it online a little. And then someone mentioned, hey, I know this exists, but I can't really formulate it. So here is me formulating it. The motherhood penalty definitely has some aspects in the profession itself. You are undervalued, you are seen as less committed, you are seen as more risky as a hire, you're seen as having other obligations, and overall you're seen as a less serious professional candidate. And that's infuriating as is. And then there is also obviously the fact that women are underpaid and that there is still a significant wage gap among attorneys. This one was about among attorneys, and that gap is compounded for women who are moms for all of the reasons I've mentioned before. So we go into this making less money than equally qualified and equally hardworking men, which is infuriating. Okay, but then there's LawMa math, and here's how it goes. Every time that I have to be absent, either because there's an after school, like an event that takes place in after school hours or in the evenings, or if I have to travel, every time that happens, I need to pay for someone to cover my second shift. My second shift is all of the work that I do in visible unpaid labor to take care of my kids. So getting up in the morning with them, making sure that they have their breakfast, making sure that their lunches are packed, making sure that they end up in the right places in the morning, and then in the evening, afternoon, picking them up. Maybe there's some after school activities, maybe there's some appointments, and then making sure they have the adequate environment for them to do their homework, feeding them and doing the evening routine, and then getting them to bed. And all of that is a good at least 4 to 6 hours of work every day. But every time I leave, someone else has to do that job. And that is what the motherhood penalty talks about, but it does so silently, implicitly, right? There's this idea, well, moms do more, right? But what does it mean that they do more? It's not just that we're more busy. It's also that there is a cost to replace us when we are asked to expand beyond the hours of a workday. So mom math is saying, okay, well, every time I travel, I need to have someone in the morning for about 2 hours and someone in the afternoon for about, let's say, 5 hours, right? So you're looking at 7 hours. At $20 an hour, that's $140 a day. So without counting the overnight, and I will get to that, it costs me $140 a day to leave, to travel, to be called upon to go elsewhere. Which means that if I am traveling with a male counterpart, and here's the reality, if we're both parents, he's just counting on his partner's unpaid labor. So women are bearing the price. Another woman is paying the price for him to be able to travel. And when he travels and I travel, he's getting paid X amount. I am getting paid X minus $140. That doesn't count overnights. If you happen to be with a partner who either works nights or has to travel as well, you need another, let's say, 10 hours of coverage at, let's say you can negotiate it down, $15 an hour. That's another $150. We're talking $290. It's $290 every time that I travel. I used to, for work. And that's not compensated. That is a motherhood penalty. Because not only will I very likely not be making as much money as my male counterpart because, gap, I'll also be making less money effectively because I have to pay for someone to cover my other shift. I spent years, and people don't talk about this or they don't admit it, and I don't know if it's just out there in the shadows. And for a long time I thought, well, maybe I'm just a weirdo, I'm just stupid, there must have been a better way and I didn't figure it out. But for years, I spent money I didn't have. I spent money on childcare I could not afford because I wanted to build my career. I wanted that big, beautiful, grand career that I could have achieved if it was only looked at by the number of hours I was working, the quality of my work, my dedication, my loyalty, my willingness to go above and beyond, and my intelligence. If just those had mattered, I would have had it. But the issue is that I also had kids. And so I spent years spending money I didn't have on childcare I needed to grow this career that I was promised that if I was strong enough and smart enough and hard enough and I worked hard, worked enough for the people that were paying me, I would get there. But once they were done with me, they moved on. And I was left with the expense and not the compensation. That is part of the motherhood penalty. I'll give you another example. There was an expert who insisted that he only wanted to meet after hours because he had a day job and he wanted to meet, this was his consulting side gig. And so he would only meet over dinner. So I would have to spend 4 hours between driving there and then spending a good 3 hours with them and then driving back, a good 4 hours out of the house in the evening. That's $80. That's $20 an hour. And admittedly, I was towards the end of my time at that place and I knew I was done, but I just sent my employer the bill. I'm like, you're forcing me to spend money on extending my work hours, but there's a cost associated with that and you're making me bear that cost. And that's not okay. And I'll add another aspect of this. And it goes back to doing that math. And it was really a moment of realization for me. I calculated out how much my effective hourly rate was. It was $40 an hour. It was less than $40 an hour. It was like 38-ish. Because I looked at how many hours I was actually working. So I was billing means I worked more, but I was billing about 70 hours a week. Sometimes 80. One time I got to 100. So then I calculated out based on my 6-figure salary, which would have looked good from the outside, I guess. And I was making about 38-ish around there an hour. But actually making effectively $18 an hour. Do you wonder why moms leave the profession? I didn't do 4 years of undergrad, 3 years of law school, graduate with beautiful GPAs at both institutions, top 10% of my class from law school, so I could make an effective wage of $18 an hour. And, by the way, never see my kids. And you wonder why we leave?